Have you ever noticed how the dynamic of a relationship changes when you stop chasing, stop begging, stop pleading for attention? It's as if, suddenly, something shifts in the air. The person who seemed distant, indifferent, now looks at you with curiosity, with amazement, even with renewed desire. Is it magic? No. It's deep psychology. And nobody understood this better than Carl Jung, who unveiled the secrets of why, when you stop begging, he is surprised in ways you never imagined. Today we're going to explore a truth that few dare to face, the extraordinary transformation that occurs, not just in your relationships, but in your entire life, when you finally choose yourself. When you stop begging for crumbs of attention and start honoring your own value. And I promise you that, by the end of this video, you'll understand why Jung considered this change as one of the most powerful acts a human being can perform. Before we dive deeper, I want you to ask yourself a question. How many times have you felt that you're giving too much in a relationship and receiving very little in return? That feeling of emptiness, of emotional exhaustion, is no coincidence. Jung described it as the inevitable result of ignoring your own center, your own being. Because every time you beg for love, attention, or validation from someone else, you're sending a clear message, not just to that person, but to your own unconscious, that you don't consider yourself enough. The universe, according to Jung, operates under principles of energy and balance. And here's the fascinating paradox he discovered. The more you chase, the less attractive you become. Not because there's something wrong with you, but because the pursuit itself alters the natural balance of relationships. It creates an energetic imbalance where one person constantly gives while the other simply receives. And nature, including human nature, will always seek to restore balance. Jung observed that when a person constantly begs for attention, they're projecting their personal power onto the other. They're telling the universe, my value depends on this person's validation. And the universe, always resonant, gives back exactly that. Situations where their value is questioned, where they must continue begging to receive crumbs of attention. It's a self-perpetuating cycle, and it only breaks when you make a radical decision to choose yourself. But what does it really mean to choose yourself? Jung described it as the process of individuation, that heroic journey toward your own center, toward the integration of all parts of your being, even those you've repressed or denied. It's not about selfishness, but authenticity. It's not rejection of others, but deep respect for who you truly are. Think for a moment. How many times have you ignored your own needs to please someone else? How many times have you tolerated behaviors that you knew, deep down, didn't respect you? Jung would say that every time you do this, you're fragmenting your psyche, creating a disconnection between your persona, the mask you show to the world, and your authentic self. This disconnection not only affects your emotional well-being, but also alters how others perceive you. Specifically, it alters how that person from whom you so desire attention and recognition perceives you. Because, as Jung discovered, human beings have an intuitive capacity to detect incongruence in others. We can feel, even unconsciously, when someone is not being authentic, when they're acting from need rather than from their center. And here comes the revelation that will change your perspective forever. When you stop begging, when you reconnect with your own value and begin to act from that place of inner fullness, the other person perceives it. Not necessarily consciously, but they feel it. They feel that something has fundamentally changed in the dynamic. You're no longer projecting your power onto them. You've reclaimed it for yourself. This reclamation of your power creates a fascinating effect that Jung observed again and again in his patients. The person who previously seemed indifferent begins to feel curious. They start wondering what has changed in you, why you no longer seem to need them as before. And this curiosity frequently transforms into something deeper, attraction. But make no mistake. This is not a manipulative trick to get someone to pay attention to you. It's a genuine change in your energy, in how you relate to yourself and, by extension, to the world. Jung emphasized that authenticity cannot be faked. It must be lived. And it's precisely this authenticity that becomes magnetic, not just for that specific person, but for everyone around you. When you stop begging and start honoring your truth, something happens that Jung called synchronicity. Those seemingly casual but deeply meaningful events that seem to conspire in your favor. Suddenly, the person who ignored you starts seeking you out. The one who took you for granted now values your presence. Not because you've changed to please them, but because you've changed to honor yourself. Jung described this phenomenon as a reflection of the change in your energy field. When you align with your truth, when you integrate your shadows and recognize your own value, you emit a different frequency to the world. And the world, including the people in it, responds to that frequency. Let me share a concrete example. One of my followers told me how she had been in a relationship where she constantly sought her partner's approval. She obsessively checked her phone, anxiously waited for his messages, and felt devastated when he didn't respond as she expected. She was, in her own words, begging for attention. After deep self-knowledge work, inspired precisely by Jungian principles, she decided to do something radical: stop begging. Not as a strategy to manipulate, but as an act of self-love. She began reconnecting with her passions, establishing healthy boundaries, honoring her own needs. And something amazing happened. Her partner, who previously seemed indifferent, began to notice the change. At first with confusion, then with curiosity, and finally with renewed respect. The relationship dynamic changed completely. It was no longer her chasing and him running away. Now there was balance, a genuine give and take, but the most important thing wasn't the change in him, but the change in her. She discovered that, even if the relationship hadn't improved, she no longer needed his validation to feel complete. This is the true essence of what Jung taught us, that the journey toward the other always begins with the journey toward oneself, that you cannot find outside what you haven't cultivated within. And that when you stop desperately seeking external approval, something magical happens. You begin to attract people and situations that reflect your new state of consciousness. Jung described this process as withdrawing the projection. When you withdraw the projection of your personal value from another person and reclaim it for yourself, the entire dynamic changes. You're no longer operating from lack, but from fullness, and that fullness is irresistibly attractive. But this path is not without challenges. In fact, Jung warned that the moment you decide to choose yourself is also when you'll face the greatest resistance, both internal and external. Your own mind will try to convince you that you're being selfish, that you'll lose that person if you don't continue giving your all. And it's possible that some people in your life, accustomed to your previous behavior pattern, will feel threatened by your new stance. This is where many falter, where they fall back into old patterns for fear of losing what they have, even if what they have causes them pain. Jung called this moment the dark night of the soul, that period where everything seems to fall apart before rebuilding in a more authentic and aligned way. It's crucial to understand that when you stop begging for attention, when you establish healthy boundaries and honor your value, you're not rejecting the other person. You're rejecting the dysfunctional dynamic that has been established between you. You're creating space for something new, something more balanced and genuine. Sometimes, this space will allow the relationship to flourish in a way you never imagined. Other times, it will reveal that the relationship has already fulfilled its purpose in your life. Jung believed that each relationship comes to teach us something about ourselves, to help us integrate aspects of our shadow. And sometimes, once the lesson is learned, the relationship must transform or even end. What you should remember is that, regardless of the external outcome, the act of choosing yourself is never in vain. It's the bravest and most transformative act you can perform. Because when you choose yourself, you're declaring to the universe that you recognize your intrinsic value, that you don't need to beg for what you deserve by birthright. Jung discovered something fascinating in his work with patients. Those who finally chose themselves, who stopped seeking external validation, not only improved their relationships, but all aspects of their lives. Their work became more satisfying, their health improved, their creativity flourished. It was as if, by aligning their inner world, their entire outer world began to reflect that new alignment. This is because, according to Jung, there is no real separation between the internal and the external. Everything we experience outside is at some level a reflection of what we carry within. When we treat ourselves with respect and love, the world begins to treat us the same way. Not because the world has changed, but because our relationship with it has changed. Think about how you feel when you're constantly begging for attention. That feeling of anxiety, of insufficiency, of always being on the verge of losing something valuable. That energy not only affects your romantic relationships, but every aspect of your life. It keeps you in a state of scarcity, of fear, of dependency. Now, imagine how it feels to live from a place of fullness, of self-respect, of confidence in your own value. That energy also permeates every aspect of your existence. It allows you to make decisions from clarity, not from desperation. It allows you to give from abundance, not from fear of losing. And surprisingly, it makes you much more attractive, not just to potential partners, but to all the experiences and opportunities you wish to attract. Jung emphasized that this transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, a journey with advances and setbacks. There will be days when you'll revert to old patterns, when the temptation to beg for attention will be almost irresistible. In those moments, compassion toward yourself is essential. Remember that you're not dismantling just a behavior pattern, but possibly a lifetime of conditioning. From childhood, many of us learned that our value depends on others' approval. That love must be earned, it's not our natural right. These are deeply rooted programs, and dismantling them requires time and gentleness. What Jung taught us, and what I want you to take from this video, is that the true power in any relationship lies in recognizing your own value. Not in proving something to someone else, not in changing to be accepted, but in being so authentically you that the world has no choice but to adjust to your truth. When you stop begging for attention, when you reconnect with your center and act from that place of authenticity, something fundamentally changes in how you relate to others. You're no longer operating from lack, but from fullness. And that fullness is deeply attractive, not just to that specific person who has been ignoring you, but to everyone around you. This change isn't about manipulating to get what you want. It's about transforming yourself to become the person who will naturally attract what you deserve. Jung described it as the process of becoming who you truly are, of manifesting your highest potential. And it's in that state of authenticity where truly meaningful relationships can flourish. Now, let me share some practical strategies, inspired by Jung's work, to begin reclaiming your power and stop begging for attention. First, recognize your patterns. Jung emphasized the importance of awareness as the first step toward transformation. Observe without judgment how you behave in your relationships. Are you constantly seeking approval? Do you feel anxious when you don't receive an immediate response? Do you sacrifice your needs to please others? This recognition isn't to punish yourself, but to illuminate what needs to heal. Second, cultivate your inner garden. Jung firmly believed in the importance of developing a rich and nurturing relationship with yourself. This means dedicating time to activities that nourish you, exploring your passions, honoring your needs. When your cup is full, you don't need to beg others to fill it for you. Third, establish healthy boundaries. This doesn't mean building walls, but clearly defining what is acceptable to you and what is not. Jung saw boundaries as a way to honor both your space and that of the other, creating a healthier and more respectful relational field. Fourth, practice loving detachment. Jung talked a lot about the importance of letting go of control, of allowing things to develop naturally without forcing them. This doesn't mean you don't care, but that you trust in the natural process of life and relationships. Fifth, integrate your shadows. Jung believed that much of our desperation in relationships comes from projecting unrecognized aspects of ourselves onto the other. By making the unconscious conscious, by accepting all parts of yourself, even those you consider negative, You reduce the need to seek completeness in someone else. And finally, trust the process. The path of individuation, as Jung called it, is not linear. There will be moments of clarity and moments of confusion, moments of strength and moments of weakness. The important thing is your commitment to yourself, the decision to keep choosing yourself even when it's difficult. Remember, the ultimate goal isn't to manipulate someone into paying attention to you. It's to create a life so rich, so full, so authentic, that others' attention is a welcome compliment, not a desperate need. It's to become someone who naturally attracts balanced and nourishing relationships, because that's what you offer yourself. Jung observed that when his patients reached this point, when they finally integrated all parts of themselves and consciously chose themselves, they experienced a profound sense of peace and purpose. They were no longer at the mercy of external approval. They had found their center, their truth, their power. And yes, in that process, many discovered that their relationships dramatically transformed. The person who previously ignored them now sought them out. The one who took them for granted now valued them. But the most surprising thing was that they no longer cared as much. Not because they didn't value the relationship, but because their sense of worth no longer depended on it. This is the most beautiful paradox Jung taught us, that when we stop desperately needing something, we create the space for it to come to us naturally. That when we stop chasing, we allow ourselves to be found. And that, ultimately, the most important relationship we will ever have is the one we have with ourselves. If you're currently in a relationship where you feel you're constantly begging for attention, where your needs are ignored or minimized, I want you to know that you deserve more. Not because the other person is bad or trying to hurt you, but because every healthy relationship must be based on mutual respect, on balanced give and take. Choosing yourself doesn't necessarily mean ending that relationship. Sometimes it simply means transforming the dynamic, establishing new parameters, clearly communicating your needs. Jung believed in the transformative power of relationships, in how they can help us grow and evolve. But he also believed that transformation must begin with ourselves. And if, after doing this inner work, you discover that the relationship no longer serves you, that there is no space for the kind of connection you deserve, remember that letting go is also an act of love. Love for yourself and ultimately, love for the other. Because no relationship based on dependency or imbalance can truly honor the essence of who we are. Jung taught us that every relationship in our life, especially those that cause us pain, comes to show us something about ourselves. To help us integrate parts of our shadow, to heal old wounds, to lead us toward greater completeness. When a relationship constantly makes you feel insufficient, when you find yourself begging for crumbs of attention, it's a sign. Not a sign that something is wrong with you, but that there's a pattern, a belief, a wound that needs to be seen and healed. The true miracle occurs when you do that inner work, when you dare to look at what hurts and reclaim the parts of yourself that you've given away to others. You don't just transform your relationships, you transform your entire life. Because, as Jung discovered, the outer world is a reflection of the inner. Change one, and the other will inevitably follow. So here's my invitation to you. Today, right now, make the decision to choose yourself, not as an act of selfishness, but as an act of deep love, for yourself, for others, for life itself. Decide that you will no longer beg for what you deserve by birthright, that you will treat yourself with the same respect, care, and value that you wish to receive from others, and then observe what happens. Not just in how others respond to you, but in how you feel about yourself. In the peace that comes from knowing that, no matter what, you are enough. In the freedom you experience when your happiness no longer depends on external validation. In the joy that naturally arises when you live from your truth. Carl Jung dedicated his life to understanding the mysteries of the human psyche, to unveiling the patterns that keep us trapped in cycles of suffering. And his most powerful message, the one I want you to take away today, is that transformation is possible, that you are not condemned to repeat the same patterns, to beg for the same crumbs, to feel the same emptiness. You have within you everything you need to create a life of fullness, authenticity, and genuine connection. A life where you don't beg for love, but generate it from within. Where you don't chase validation, but recognize your intrinsic value. Where you don't fear loneliness, because you've discovered the rich company of your own being. And when you reach that place, when you finally choose yourself above all else, get ready. Because not only will he be surprised by the change in you, you yourself will be amazed at all you are capable of being and creating when you finally allow yourself to shine with your own light. Now, I'd like to hear about your experience. Have you ever found yourself begging for attention in a relationship? Have you experienced that magical change that occurs when you finally choose yourself? Share your story in the comments. Each share not only helps me better understand what resonates with you, but can also inspire someone else who is going through something similar. And if this video has impacted you, if it has ignited something in you that you want to explore more deeply, share it with someone you think could benefit from this message. Sometimes, the right words at the right time can be the difference between continuing in old patterns or daring to choose something new. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss future videos where we'll continue exploring these deep truths about love, relationships, and the journey toward our true self. Thank you for being here, for dedicating this time to nourishing your inner growth. Remember, change begins with you, and when you dare to choose yourself, to honor your truth, to stop begging for what you deserve, the entire universe responds. Not only will he be surprised, you will surprise yourself with the greatness that has always been within you, waiting to be recognized and released. See you in the next video. A big hug to you.